Hello everyone. This is Berk Çallı from the Worcester Polytechnic Institute Robotics Engineering Department from the United States. Patrick and I will be moderating this research pitches session. This is a very exciting session that we will be able to learn cutting edge um, research happening in the climate robotics space. Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Al. Thank you so much for joining. I am on the organizing committee with Burke, although I got to say, Burke definitely took the lead. I was not as involved as I would have liked. But it's great to be here. I'm the founder of the Climate Robotics Network, and so I've been involved in enabling the past three summits. So thank you all for joining. Really excited to have these research pitches. By the way, just to put it in context, the first summit, we only had, quote, only had startup pitches. And that really felt that like it left a gap because there's so much exciting applied research, and you're going to hear about a bunch of them now that simply didn't make it on the radar. And that was such it was just we felt the gap. And so I'm really glad that we're filling it in such a great way right now. So thanks. Back to you, Burke.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Exactly. This is definitely filling in a very important gap in the previous summits. And we will have four pitches today. It will be in the format of 5 minutes presentation and 5 minutes questions. So please ask your questions in the Q&A tab of Zoom, and we will be able to uh, direct them to the pitch presenters. So let's start with Kevin. Kevin, you can go ahead and share your screen and start your
Perfect.
presentation when you are ready.
Awesome. First off, thanks for having us on. It's really exciting to be able to share our recent work with you. This is one of the first times that we've shown some of this in such a public setting, so I'm really excited. And yeah, it's great to see you all and looking forward. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So my name is Kevin Holdcroft. I'm in the Laboratory of Sustainability Robotics under Professor Mirko Kovac. If you look at the two figures, I'm the one on the left without the hair. And I'm here to talk to you today about aerial aquatic robots for polar environments. And in particular, what we managed to do in Greenland last summer. So before we begin, I'd like to start with the most important thing. Slide isn't progressing there. There you go, which is the team. Now, everybody you see here is had some contribution towards this project, but those in color directly worked on it. So that's myself, rare photo with hair, Lachlan, Albert, Luca, Gaston, Lara, and Mirko. So thank you to the team for making this happen. So it turns out that there's little known about the microbiology near water terminating glaciers. I know this is a bit of a mouthful. We'll walk through it. On the left, we have this kind of a cross section of what a glacier fjord looks like. We have the sky. Everybody knows the sky. And then we have a layer of fresh water, and this comes from melting icebergs and melting glaciers. And underneath that, there's this kind of salty, brackish water, semi-salty, and it actually doesn't mix as well as you would think. There is mixing, but not as much as is evident. And so the closer you get to the glacier, the more of the water column is taken up by this freshwater layer. And the further you go out, there is some mixing. And so the iceberg and the environment starts to mix the water, and the microbes start to adapt, and there's less known. So there's a big question, which is how do we get close to glaciers and icebergs? So to this end, I want to introduce the 4L platform. So we're lucky to work with the 4L Heritage Association, and they run this beautiful research vessel. It has a clean room on board, it has a wet lab on board, and it has a small mechanical workshop. And it's intended for ecological research near coastlines, and in particular in the polar environments. So we were on this vessel in Greenland last summer. And to get close to these kind of dangerous regions, we use something called Medusa. Now, In a nutshell, the Medusa is an aerial robot. It's a drone that is able to land on water, lower scientific payload, retrieve samples, and bring it back to the boat. And this is awesome because it turns out collapsing glaciers and tipping icebergs can be quite dangerous. And so this allows us to get close. We go there, we record the samples, we do the measurements, and we bring it back. And because we're just landing on the water, touch and go, there's minimal environmental contamination. So this is really quite fantastic, and I love it. Um, it's technically quite challenging. There's a lot of considerations to go on in the drone itself. This aerial aquatic transition is quite difficult. We have surface tension that's literally sucking the drone into the water. And so we have to consider that when it comes to our maths and our design for progressing this. Similarly, standard oceanographic tools are too heavy for what we want on the drone. And so we had to make a custom payload and a completely custom sensor suite and a custom winch that would work in this environment. And of course, there's your standard system-wide trade-offs that you see in pretty much all of robotics. Now, the catch is not only is this a custom system, but the TRL has to be high. And this seems to be a theme of this conference, I would say. I think this is brought up in almost every session, but the technology readiness level has to be complete. And so I'm going to show you some very quick photos of what it was like in Greenland. On the left, we see this beautiful glacier, a drone high in the sky. In the middle, we're doing a measurement test, and you can see the 4L boat in the background. The top right, we have our Medusa platform flying next to a large iceberg, and this would be a little bit dangerous to get close to. And then bottom left, we have our collaborator, Luca Paoli, along with our pilot, Lachlan, who is very happy to receive the first environmental samples. They're currently being processed. The bottom is myself and Luca loading it on a different Luca loading it onto the back of the boat. And of course, you have to show off that you went swimming in a glacier fjord in Greenland. So it was cold. Um, so at the end, as far as we are aware, we have the first aerial aquatic robot in polar conditions. We are able to acquire these samples that are currently being processed. And we basically proved that, yes, this tool works. And so what's next? We're going back to Greenland this summer. We're going for a large sampling campaign, and I'm very excited to see how that goes and start to talk about that in the future. And lastly, we're members of the TerraPolar Station Consortium, and soon enough, we will have our tools on board the TerraPolar Station, which will drift across the North Pole and provide insights that would otherwise be challenging to get. So with that, I'd like to thank again the team, our collaborators, the Climate Robotics Summit for having us on, and you for listening. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Right.
I would like to start with a question. This
I'll
is
stop
like
sharing.
very fascinating, of course. What is could you explain the importance of taking these measurements from the climate science perspective?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to be a little bit careful here because there is some stuff that um, I don't want to oversell nor undersell because my understanding of this is I'm still kind of processing it. Um, but a large part about this is being able to, the closer you get, so the environment's quite unique, and so the microbes there are quite unique. And so for one, there's genomic data and genomic information that's quite unique to this location. Similarly, there's questions about cloud formation. How do you come from evaporated water to clouds? And there's models that suggest it's actually microbes in the air that are causing this initial nucleation of particles. And so, but that's hypothesis is currently difficult to assess. And so this is something we're working towards as well. So with better understanding of this becomes better weather models here. So
Fascinating.
it's there's a
Um,
whole bunch of different little questions that are all trying to be simultaneously answered.
Absolutely. Is so the navigation of
Oh,
the
sharing.
robots, is that happening autonomously, or is it a remote control system?
For right now, we have a pilot. Right now, we have a pilot, and the big challenge is legislation, um,
Oh,
because I mean, as is similar with most aerial robotics and drone companies, no, it's not always favorable to fly drones. And in Greenland in particular, there's sensitive areas where there's national parks, which are quite well protected. And so we have to be really litigious and really complete with our operations and conscious of the environment, both legally and personally, because of course we want to do it personally, but we have to make sure that this is backed up in evidence.
Interesting. Are there specific control challenges, like specific to this environment? Like how close do you?
Yeah,
I am naive about this operation space. So can you talk about these a little bit?
control operations. So the environment itself is a bit interesting. There's lots of kind of unknowns, I guess you would say, that we mapped out a bit in the first year. GNSS reliability and so on. How much drift is there, depending on how much more you go north versus not. Um, there's natural control struggles when developing a drone like this. I didn't want to go into that in detail, but the buoyancy system is literally subject to the downwash of the propellers of the drones, which causes some nasty little control problems. Um, as a practical example, we have our little scientific payload that we were using, and in one of our first tests, it let's just say it didn't sink. It stopped at around 7 meters deep, and that's because that's when this fresh water turned to salt water. And so we tested it in fresh water, and the salt water was enough to prevent it from sinking further. And that was solved by adding a buoyancy system or adding an extra ballast. But it was the combination of the cold environment, which caused the cable to be stiff, and the salt water that ended up with this challenge. And that was a fun little anecdote that we didn't expect. Easy to solve though.
I'm pretty sure it
Yeah.
was more complicated than you are making it. Um, uh, Patrick, if you have a question, please let us know. Otherwise, I have one very quick one. But
Mhm.
Patrick, if you
No, question got answered already. I was just interested in just the potential environmental impact if, a piece of the drone were to go floating somewhere, or so it sounds like it's very highly regulated, which does make it easier for you from the regulations
Mhm.
perspective, but it's good to know that these are in place because in many countries where I've worked, in very remote areas, like in the Peruvian Amazon rainforest, people could do whatever they wanted. It was a Wild West, right?
Mhm.
And so that was extremely problematic. So I guess,
Mhm.
they're both extremes, I suppose, but I'd rather be on the one that you've had to deal with than anything goes in these kinds of
Yeah.
very highly,
Yeah.
important environmental areas. So anyway, sorry, back to
Mhm.
you, Brooke.
no, yeah, it's yeah, it was great to get to know about your research, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
Um, Next, we will have Galen Brown from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. A spoiler, Galen Brown is working in our lab. Yeah, you can share your screen, Galen, whenever you are ready.
All right. Is this visible and audible to everyone?
Yes.
Excellent. So thank you for the introduction. I'm Galen Brown. I'm a computer science student in Barrick's Manipulation and Environmental Robotics Lab, and I'm going to be talking a little about our work in recycling auto labeling today. So it's a climate robotics summit. I don't need to tell you that waste disposal is a significant problem. And if you were here yesterday, you know that we are blowing past the UN estimates for the increase in waste production every year. And our recycling system is not keeping up with that. And so the question becomes, what is the limiting factor? Is it we don't have enough space? Is it we don't have enough equipment? And the answer is it's labor. That if we had more people who were sorting recycling, we could process more recycling. But it's not this kind of recycling sorting. It's this kind of recycling sorting, where you have a industrial facility which takes the consumer waste and then separates it by material. So it's a robotics conference. The next question becomes, why haven't we automated this? And the answer is that we have, to a large extent, that material reclamation facilities in the US employ significant amounts of mechanical sorting that separates materials by material properties. But they're left with things which either slip through the cracks or have similar enough material properties that they can't be separated that way. And so you need a final hand sorting step. And that is what we'd like to automate. But the question still becomes, why haven't we automated this already? That I'm not the first person to think of this. And the answer is data availability, that for recycling in particular, the data is incredibly local, that what waste looks like in Massachusetts, our home state, versus, say, California, is going to be extremely different. And that's a big problem because data annotation is extremely expensive for this area. That in our past study, we found that it costs about $1.21 to annotate a single frame of recycling waste. That means that to do a large data set like general purpose models are trained on would cost hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And that's a particular problem because recycling is a margin-sensitive industry. That if we were making semiconductors, that might be plausible. But recycling sorting is extremely sensitive to the price of both the raw materials and the labor used. That you may have heard the story that the US doesn't do recycling. We just send our recycling to China to be done there. And that is not correct. We do a significant fraction of the recycling domestically. But there are materials, plastics in particular, where the difference in labor costs determines whether or not they can be economically recycled. And so if the cost of labor is too high, wealthy areas will ship them to poorer areas, both in the US and around the world, to be sorted there. And so our hope is that if we can make this economical, that's not just going to be sort of a quantitative improvement where we'll handle 10% more recycling. It will be a qualitative improvement where we suddenly go from being unable to process these kinds of materials domestically to being able to process them on site, which is an important climate justice goal. So the big insight that our lab had was that humans are already providing the labels for this sorting task. That what happens is that when people are doing this hand sorting, this is me sorting in our lab's pilot plant, they're manually labeling each of these as belonging to a particular category of material. So what we can do is we can identify the objects that are being removed, and then we can track them backwards through the video to create category labels that we can take this image and then say, this is going to be removed. It has to be cardboard. And that's completely automated, completely based on what people are already doing naturally. So great, I've shown it works in lab. Many things work in lab. Here it's working in an actual material reclamation facility with the person moving naturally, not behaving in an inorganic way, just doing their job and producing training data from that. And the advantage of that is that it's very low cost, that the only expense here was adding an additional camera in this position, and we can produce as much training data as is needed from that. It's also individual data, that because recycling is so location specific, you can't have a single master data set that everyone in the world uses. And this lets us go to each individual plant and produce their own data set for them. And it lets us keep updating that data set for them as recycling changes, as new products are introduced, as the time of year changes, and the condition of the recycled material varies based on that. And finally, this enables a human-machine collaboration, that we're not trying to cut the human out of the loop. We're trying to improve what they're doing naturally, to take a sort of organic process and produce extra value from it, rather than eliminating people. Yes, so that's our work. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Galen. Patrick, would you like to chime in?
You know the stuff already inside out, right? This is really, really super stuff. I love this idea of enabling technologies to becoming more widely accessible as well. Um, I suppose my question might be, so, is this ready for prime time? Can especially for I'm thinking I spend a lot of time working across the majority world, especially in Africa, and I know that waste management there is a challenge. So could this kind of setup then really help enable much more localized and decentralized automation of this kind of waste management? So I guess maybe a few questions there, but like, when can this be used in Kenya, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question and a real concern with these things. So we have it already working in a local facility. We've partnered with Izmir in Turkey to start doing data processing there as well. We're talking to another recycling plant in the US. Um, and I think that the answer is very soon, that every time we've gone to a new facility, we've found new challenges that we weren't expecting. That going from the lab to our first facility was a big shift because people did a lot of things we weren't expecting, that the industrial setting is different than our lab attempt to recreate it. Moving from one setting to another has been a much smaller shift. We've still needed to make some tweaks. Um, we're definitely moving towards a program where you can just turn it on, fiddle with some numbers, and then immediately get a working data analysis. And if you would like to talk to us about doing data collection in Kenya, we'd be very excited. But it's not quite there yet.
It's
So,
great stuff. Thanks a lot for sharing. I don't know if it might be useful at all, but I think one of our speakers from a year or two ago was from Wasteflow out of Switzerland. I happen to know the founder very well. We used to work in the same organization years and years ago, and he's definitely somebody who has um, the right values as far as I'm concerned. And so if that were somehow to be of any value add, happy to make a connection. But I don't know if we have maybe time for any other questions, Burke, or
very, very quickly, really in 30 seconds, Galen, that we have. What were the main challenges while implementing these kind of auto labeling?
That the sort of social challenge has actually been data security, that most of the recycling processes are trade secret protected. And so our US partners have been very concerned about what kind of data we're allowed to collect, what kind of data we're allowed to share. On a technical level, it's a terrible environment for machine vision, that lots of occlusions, different lighting, everything is crumpled and dirty. And so we've had to make a very robust system to be able to handle all of that and to do it reliably, because this needs to not only be automated, it needs to be reliable. And the example clip I showed you, we're getting 95% precision, which I'm pretty happy with.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we are going for our next speaker, Kaushik. Uh, would you like to introduce yourself and share your screen?
Hi everyone, my name is Kaushik Jayaram. I'm a faculty member at Imperial, and in my group, we build bio-inspired robots which are approaching the scale of insects. So specifically, so we see ourselves as a technology provider or enabler. We haven't directly worked too much in the climate space, but we're interested in doing that. We think small robots provide unique access because of their size and can be useful for a variety of applications when instrumented with the right sets of sensing tools. So in my lab, we've been building a bunch of robots at a variety of scales, going from palm scale all the way to penny scales. So these robots can be tethered or untethered for different applications. And one of the unique things is the way we build it, we can produce platforms at a variety of different scales at equal ease. One of the unique things about our robots are these are compliant or adaptable to environmental constraints. So these have been inspired by looking at cockroaches and other biological organisms, which are masters at exploring difficult to access spaces. So, inspired by the cockroach locomotion in confined spaces, we were able to engineer this robot called CRAM, which could basically compress itself vertically by over 50%. So this is an example of this like bio-inspired approach we use in our lab, where we are enabling new capabilities such as adaptability, using a bio-inspired mechanism, which is a soft, compliant exoskeleton to allow robots at the scale to move through confined spaces. More recently, we've been taking these larger platforms and shrinking them in size. And also, so here's just showing like a half scale version of this, which is as you can see, has a number of like interesting mechanisms which goes into some of the smallest mechanisms are about the size of human hair. But because of the fabrication processes we use, we are able to maintain the dexterity independent of these size. These smaller robots are inspired by the similar larger robots what you saw, but instead of like compressing vertically like CRAM, this robot is compressing laterally. And what's more is they can be compress in one way, get all the way to the end, and then omnidirectionally or orthogonally basically compress in the other direction by just switching the gates, enabling complex locomotion in these kind of confined spaces. So we recognize that a lot of environments in nature are going to be complex confined spaces, and we believe our technology can enable access to those spaces, and we can instrument them with a variety of sensors to help monitor and collect data about those specific environments. So, for example, we've been integrating different sensors, and one of them is, for example, a camera. Here you can see a live feed from a camera. Here we're showing more of a inspection task for industries, but we think that similar approaches can be adapted for climate applications as well. While we are building small scale legged robots, our team is also interested in making some open source low cost wheel systems which can carry basically all the electronics and things on board, and they can be driven. So here's a series of robots which have been inspired some early work with some collaborators at Boulder who were using again similar technologies for endoscope mechanisms, and we've adapted those to basically explore these like burrows. And so we're working with some collaborators to basically understand how mice basically build burrows and what kind of places where they cache things in. And so this is basically early efforts in order to develop robotic platforms to be able to assist with that. That's my pitch, and I would love to work with climate scientists out there to understand some of the specific challenges, what you have in this space, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Um, I just want to say I had the privilege to go to Kaushik's lab and see some of these myself, and these are great videos, but they are even cooler when you see them in person. Um, Patrick, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks so much for sharing, Kaushik. Very cool stuff. I think I have two questions. Don't need to answer both. One of them is learning a bit more about the kind of climate applications, use cases, whether it's climate sustainability, environment. And then the second is a question around the energy autonomy? Because of course, with the videos, I think we're seeing some wires here. Of course, that's where it all starts, right? And so just wondering what the autonomy would be then out in the wild, and what kind of other potential kind of powering mechanisms you might be thinking of. I don't know what's possible at that scale because it's really impressive small scale.
Yeah, so thanks for the questions, Patrick. So I think really quickly, we are open to a variety of different questions. These are, I think, the easiest or the nearest entry points for us where we see us being helpful is thinking of these robots as basically mobile IoT kind of sensors with legs, wheels, and other aspects. So where we can gather information about the environment and then pass it on to like some server, and then where you can do like more complex processing. So I think that's the simplest thing. These are like mobile nodes, which can provide basically kind of like data on demand and with high spatial temporal fidelity. I think that's the unique thing where we can program them, or like a vacuum cleaner, they can have some intelligence where if they notice that there are some dramatic changes in, let's say, they're monitoring soil pH, and so they're going to scan that area more frequently and then go to less frequent area. So I think that's the first place where we envision. We've been not working on intervention too much, but again, that is a possibility. Again, there are some challenges at this scale, so we probably envision these robots are not going to act in isolation, but potentially in swarms or collectives, let's say, of the order of like maybe 10, depending on the application, where they're going to like split their tasks, and maybe one of them, like an ant, one of them is going to have a specialization that's going to be an explorer, another one is going to be a manipulator, another one is like a sample collector, things like that. So we're really interested in applications like, for example, plant health monitoring, where we've alternate technologies like ultrasound technologies, which we've been developing for other applications. We think we can monitor something like turgor pressure, or like even potentially, because of the scale and size of these robots, we can probably mimic natural predators or preys and kind of like trick biological systems. So these are all kind of just suite of ideas what we have, but we haven't done major work in this field, and so part of this is reaching out to potential collaborators or more experts in and understand some of the challenges in this space, and can give us direction in terms of where we can move to. With your second part, I think that is a challenge in terms of energy autonomy. We can, with this 3D printed robots, we can get about a few minutes, like around of the order of 5 to 10 minutes of operation right now with basic simple sensors like a camera or something like that. That is, we're thinking of ways to solve that. For the smallest systems, one advantage we have is depending on the environment, they can harvest energy from the environment. So things like solar cells become feasible. Also, potentially, they consume very little energy. So we can run kind of like electrodes in the soil. If it's like has sufficient electrochemical gradient, we can basically create a lead cell, or not lead cell, but like electrochemical cell on the fly. So these are some novel solutions which become feasible again because of the scale. Maybe we need to go one size smaller to enable those, but we're operating in the tens of milliwatts range, which is really exciting. And depending on the kind of sensors and how much data and how long you want it to be, there might be other issues. And the other piece where we've relied on wires is because these are complicated, like tunnel-like environments, beaming information out through like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, that becomes a challenge depending on if you're on a pipe or like a Faraday cage. So in some ways, if you want to transmit data, maybe this is the only way, or you can store it on board and then like harvest it like once you like collect the robot back on the surface or something like that. That's kind of like what we're thinking.
Super.
Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much.
We actually have two questions from the audience, and we are actually kind of out of time, but since it's exciting to get questions from the audience, very, very quickly, Kaushik. Scott Stanford says, interesting stuff, reminding me of the electroactive polymer artificial muscle work I did at SRI several years ago. What are the actuators that you are using? And the second
Yeah.
question is very, very quickly, the strength multiplier of these. How strong are these?
Yeah, so Scott, you're absolutely right. We're aware of like some of this work. We're using piezoelectric actuators, but we have explored using electroactive polymers most closely. We've been looking at like Hazel type actuators, which are combining DEAs with fluidic pouches, so like electrohydraulic actuation. But we are open to using different technologies at this scale. Absolutely, Ben. These are similar to like ants, not as great, but our robots weigh a gram and can carry a payload of 5 grams. So it's like a 1 to 5x kind of like multiplier. And so for us, it's a trade-off between how fast you can move and how much weight you can carry. But for specific applications, we can kind of play with that. But that's one of the advantages we get with scale is we try to leverage that as much as possible. So that gives us a little bit of leeway. Thank you for your questions.
It was a pleasure, Kaushik. Great seeing you.
Thank you.
Next is Enrica.
Yes,
Enrica, when you
hi.
are ready, yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I am a senior researcher at the National Research Council of Italy. In particular, I belong to the Institute of Marine Engineering. So, sorry. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you a quick overview about the activities of our joint lab named Aeron at CNR that the Italian National Research Council has together with the Aeron Robot, that is a company by Professor Fabio Bonsignorio, and in which we work basically on advanced control and AI-based embodied intelligence for the next generation of robots. Underwater, but not only underwater. So we are a bit, curious about many different stuff. Basically, we work on in a way to provide tools to perform different kinds of tasks, for example, related to climate and environmental monitoring. And I will show you in a while. Our long-term vision is having some sort of smart marine infrastructure, like the smart cities that we all know. And the idea is that we want to have tons of robots, sensors, AI system, and other devices that can cooperate to fulfill and perform some kind of tasks. The task, of course, you can choose that they can be inspection, they can be monitoring, they can be sampling, whatever. It depends on of course, on the stuff that you deploy in the environment. Of course, this is a long-term vision, and we should focus first on the necessary steps to arrive there. So first, let's clarify that one of the strong focus is we want to go in a relevant environment with our robots. And here, for example, you can see some pics and some video from previous polar research, because my institute, my colleagues, we are very highly involved in polar research. We have usually many projects in the poles. Why the poles? Probably, I mean, you all know the poles are very, very, very important to understand the planet climate evolution in the first, as a first perspective. But then also, it is a very, very harsh environment in which we need to have highly reliable systems from one side. But from the other perspective, the poles can be our test bench for our system. No? So we can, if something can reliably work in the poles, probably it can work everywhere. So this is the claim. So a fundamental brick, as I was saying, is to build reliable robots. Now we are working on this BESTI project that has been funded by the Italian Ministry of University and Research. Basically, in this project, we are creating an intelligent distributed emergent control for a swarm of small underwater robots. Here you can see the yellow platform that is one of the 2 vehicles that we developed in the framework of this project. I will skip the details because there's no time, but if you are curious, we can discuss later. Just want to say that we rely on an advanced control strategy based on stochastic control, not a classic, PID or whatever control, MPC control. And notice that the yellow robot has also a gripper, and I will show you in a while. This belief space planning approach has been mixed up with some deep learning to make the robot much more robust to dynamic missions and changing environments. Again, I'll skip the details, but we had some, for those of you that are used to work with AI, the shaping of a reward function is something very delicate. So we had some troubles and we had some solution. But what I want to say to you is that we finally ended up with a stochastic control and a path planning that is able to avoid both static obstacles like the gray cylinders that you can see here, but also it can avoid the collisions among the moving robots in the swarm. And this is important, of course, because if you have more than one robot moving in the same environment, you should avoid collision in the very first place. Here, I'm sorry, there's the audio, but it's just an electrical noise. You can see that, as I said, the robots are endowed with a soft gripper that is able to carry weights in a delicate manner. For example, this is important for fragile organism sampling and adaptive grasping. And you can see from some of the video that the material is able to deform and according to the shape of the object. Last but not least, another basic brick is the reproducibility of our robotics research. This is currently not common, but my message is that if we really want to go toward the smart marine infrastructure that I showed you with autonomous, reliable robots in a relevant environment, we should strongly focus on this reproducibility of our system. And this means basically benchmarking and performance assessment. For example, these two vehicles, which one did a better job? It depends. It depends on what you asked. It depends on the metrics that you are considering. It depends on a lot of stuff, no? We should push a bit the community toward this direction because, of course, this kind of research requires more effort, but also it gives greater outcomes in terms of progress and capabilities for our robots. So I think I will finish just saying that, as you can imagine, this is a big, big challenge. You can only think about how diverse our systems are, from humanoids to vehicle in water, to aerial vehicle, to manipulators. We have really different robots, a lot of different robots. And so ending up with a matrix or a procedure that is able to assess any kind of robot is surely not easy. However, again, I want to underline that we should really strongly focus on this. And to end up, I would like to warmly invite you to participate in this conference that is on this topic, engineering reliable autonomous system, that will be held in Zagreb, Croatia, end of May. And so if you are curious about this reliability and reproducibility issue, you can participate with us and discuss with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Enrica. It was very interesting. Patrick, would you like to go or should I?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I have a very ignorant question perhaps, but thanks so much, Enrica. I really am super interested in ocean tech, ocean robotics, and so on. And I realize this is maybe not necessarily the focus of what you're doing, so you can ignore the question entirely. I'm thinking just from an end user perspective. I have the good fortune of being part of National Geographic and their Explorers program, and I know I have a number of colleagues who are oceanographers and others who often come to me because they know I'm like the robotics person, and saying, "Hey, do you know anything any technology now that we could use for X, Y, and Z?" So my question is usability, user friendliness for somebody who's going to be an oceanographer with no tech background per se. What would be involved in kind of training that person to kind of know enough to be able to operate the technology? And I know you're not necessarily looking at commercialization and products and so on, so that's why maybe it's not a very very fair question, but I thought I'd ask anyway.
No, it's a good question. Indeed, the very final aim is to have autonomous robots, so that you just deploy them, you launch them in the water, and then that's it, basically. So this would solve at least the problem of non-expert people. Of course, it's a long, long, long road to this, of course. So in the meantime, yes, you can. For example, you could have think of having shared campaigns where you are together, the robotic expert, in case of any failures, any unexpected events, let's say. And of course, the end user is very important, because as I said in the very beginning, we provide tools uh, to be useful to some extent, and then the end user should tell us which is this extent, which is this objective. So of course it's a long road, progressively, increasingly towards autonomy. In my perspective, I am a controlist, so my my best chance is to end up with something really, really autonomous, even if it's not easy.
Gotcha. No, thanks so much, Enrica. Thanks for that. Makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
And Enrica, I actually have a related question. You show some manipulation, like picking videos as well. Uh, like, given the complexity of the problem, are they done in a teleoperated manner? Are there any components that are like maybe it's semi-autonomous or maybe it is full autonomous? And like, how do they? That particular manipulation part is could benefit from all these AI technologies.
Yeah, of course. We are working on the manipulation part right now. So we didn't test in water yet. But the idea is that on board we have a camera, at least a stereo camera, actually. So yes, with the also a NVIDIA Jetson Orin that can process, the AI stuff coming from the camera, can catch the clues, through vision, see where the object is, and then yes, the idea is to go in an autonomous manner, completely automatic. Also, the material that is soft will help a bit, because the deformable material can wrap your object and can adapt to the object, so it can provide a more firm grasp, let's say, ideally at least. We will see.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. It was great to learn about your great research,
Thank you.
and all the other activities in the CNR. Thank you. And this concludes our research pitches. Thank you so much, everyone. And next, we will be having the water access and conservation via robotics session.